We have around 50 registrations.
How many?
How many?
Around 50.
50, okay.
Yeah.
Up to now, we have 14.
But I guess someone will be watching on YouTube and someone...
No, it's, yeah, pretty fast, pretty fast increasing number. 23 already. Oh.
So it's going to be recorded as well, so we can.
Yeah, it is. It's already recording.
It's already recording. So now we have to be careful, Evgeny.
Yeah. Take care. Yeah.
What could happen wrong with us? We're in academia. We're already protected.
Regina, are you in the office or in the or at home?
I'm in the office.
Oh, okay.
So it's empty here.
And but the office is open. The school is open already, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, we actually our final state exams we did offline. So students were here and we examined them in here in the classroom. So that went well. But yesterday, 2 days ago, I was the chairwoman of the committee in Bratislava, in Slovakia, and it was organized online. I mean, incredible, exhausting work for the organizers, but I mean, it went quite well as well. You know, like 5 jury members, 10 students per day, and they were presenting projects, questions, answers. It's possible. It's not the most enjoyable thing, but it's possible to hold it like that.
Yeah, but we enjoyed our presentations. I must say that we gathered in our presentation of my studio. We had about 120 guests. And in YouTube, I found, I was following only my studio. It was about 800 viewers.
Really? That many?
It's, yeah. So I must say that I followed presentations in ETH in Zurich. And I found then in studio of Adam Caruso were less visitors than in my studio, but the biggest success was in studio of Valerio Olgiati. They limited the number of visitors of 300, but it was the line, and you couldn't jump in. When it was 299. It was already it was 1 second, and the next second it was already 300 again. But it's interesting that it's some benefits of online critiques.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's actually it didn't come to my mind that also this is the aspect of the online presentations, final exams, and so on, that it could be also viewed by that many visitors. That's true.
And that's also I can mention in our talk that also the benefit of the online presentation is that I could collect the good critiques from international critics, from Helsinki, from Tokyo, from Zurich, from Geneva, and so on. And you know, I would never succeed to gather them in one room.
That's
and
true.
it was also a part of attractiveness of this presentation, because people were interested what this guy could say, you know, that's, and the list, interesting that at the announcement of this presentation, they have the big list of very nice presented the list of all presentations with the full list of critiques for every studio. And so you could check, you could select not only the leader of the studio, but also critiques. So if you find that some of the important names you find in the list of critics, you can immediately change to another studio.
This would be a real. This would be a real place. We would have to walk a lot from one room to another. But this time it was just a couple of clicks. Maybe we should start. Guess
okay.
There are already some audience. Anya, should we start? Right?
It's already seven.
Yeah.
7:05.
Yes. So. I don't know, should I do anything to start this? Okay. Okay, let's start. My name is Alexander Staborsky, and I'm teaching at the Moscow Architecture School March. And I'm glad to welcome everyone to our first meeting in a very long series of discussions, which we titled Architectural Deschooling in the Age of Quarantine. It's the first event. Most of them will be like this one in English. So if you're okay with this, that's fine. Но если вам нужен перевод, то у вас в Zoom должен быть значок глобуса, с помощью которого можете выбрать себе русский язык. Спасибо нашему замечательному переводчику Александру Баевичу. And now I will continue in English. And first of all, I'll have to, in a most short terms, describe what these discussions will be about, and then I will introduce our speakers for today, and we will move on. So the basic subject of all of the discussions would be the crisis in architectural education. And I think when you hear this, I'm sure you think, okay, again, we discussed this thing, crisis in architectural education. I think we all, in architectural, at least academia, we all love crises. I think they make us feel that we are important, valued, and that we live in a certain moment. But there were some crises. Some of them brought very new architectural educational programs like Bauhaus or Hutemas, or 1960s and 1970s in Europe and the United States. The discussion about what is wrong with architectural education today is going on and off more or less last 10 years at least, as I witnessed. But I think this spring, it's the first time when something critical is going on, not outside of academia, but inside. Something brought us in the front of real interesting changes. Because of the pandemic and quarantines and lockdowns, we found ourselves in a very new situation, and we are probably the first one to experience it. I'm talking about distant forms of education, which lots of architectural schools all around the world had to learn how to do, had to adopt. Tens of thousands, if not more, students and teachers had to start teaching through Zoom. Thank you for that, Zoom inventors. And it feels like a change. Well, maybe it's not. But it let us question the foundations of what is architectural education. What do we want from it? Do we actually need architecture schools the way they are, or they could be radically changed? And each of our discussions, which we'll have, which will feature educators from schools from many different places with their very different agendas and experiences and approaches. Each of these discussions will have its own agenda, its own turn. And I guess in the end, which will be somewhere in mid-July, we'll see all the spectrum, the whole spectrum of ideas, what is wrong, what is good about architectural education, how it could be changed. What about the discussion that we'll have today? Today's meeting brings together two very interesting persons and two very interesting schools. It's Moscow Architecture School, March, and Architectural Institute in Prague, ARKIP. And the deans of these two schools, Eugene, Asse, and Regina, Loukotova. I will introduce them in a little bit more details later. First of all, I wanted just to share some thinking about on how these schools are close or similar or different. I think it's the schools are really have lots of shared history. We could start with a very long history of German-Prussian philosophy of education, school education, higher education from the 19th century. We also share a very interesting moment of educational avant-garde in 1920s. Also because some of educators, experimentators from Russia fled to Czechoslovakia, to Prague, and founded there some new educational projects, including, for example, Roman Ikapson, who has changed significantly linguistics, cultural studies, and so on. And of course, what we also share is a post-war moment, very contradictory situation, but still changes in architectural production and architectural education that occurred in the socialist environment, socialist system. This is our history, which which we share maybe in different to a different extent, but still. And of course, what is also seems to be close to both our schools is post-socialist neoliberal capitalist situation that we have in Moscow and in Prague. It's something new. It's something very intense. But at the same time, schools are also very different. And we just in the beginning we were discussing that March is more oriented towards Russian scene. We have mostly Russian students. ARKIP also brings European system of education to Czechia, but teaches in English, and students are half Czech, half coming from very different places. So an interesting question for me, interesting questions for me are, if new schools are critical to the situation in which they appear, what is what we are trying to start new? What is what we're trying to stop in our situations from happening again? And what from our histories we can use, and what we have to import maybe from somewhere else? That's what I asked our guests to think about. But as in all other further discussions, our guests are free to define what they want to talk about, how they see the situation. So now about our guests, and as I was saying before, we have today two deans. Dean of ARKIP School in Prague, Regina Loukotova, who is an architect and founded this school almost the same time March was founded, in 2011, right? And Eugene Asse, who is Dean of Moscow Architecture School, and who is well known in Russia as not only an architect, but also educator and public figure, with a very long experience of teaching and working as an artist and architect. Well, I guess this is where I leave you for you to discuss what you feel necessary. And hopefully by the end of this discussion, we might have some understanding of how these very new schools in what we used to think is a periphery of the educational architectural processes, what we can offer the global community of architectural education in these very interesting and, well, far from being easy times. Please.
Oh, okay. Regina, I suppose that you must start.
I must start. Ladies first.
Ladies first, of course.
Thank you, Evgeny. I'm just thinking where to start, and I think I have to start with like a kind of short history of mine. My education in architecture started in 1990 in Prague, in the Czech Republic, at the Czech Technical University. But pretty soon I left the school for Norway. And I would say these two worlds, which were so different at that time, at early 90s, brought me into the idea to start a school later. I think that, the two worlds couldn't be more different than they were at that time. What I experienced in my education at Czech Technical University was very kind of a rigid system where we were not supposed to ask somebody, but we were taught in very strict manners, which we were actually used to from before, from our secondary and basic education. While when I came to Norway, suddenly I saw the respect, I saw the openness and anti-hierarchical system. So I think that this clash actually formed my view on education in general, actually on my life in general. So that's important to mention. But another important aspect was that right after the 1989 changes, which kind of were happening in our part of the world, of course, not only in Czechoslovakia at that time, brought the Czech immigrants back to Czech Republic. And that was the act which was very much appreciated among us students. And they were well-known architects, originally Czechs, who had to emigrate because of different reasons after 1948, 1968 abroad. And they really succeeded outside. I mean, before this stream, we discussed with Evgeny ETH and how they present their project today in online form. And one of the Czech who was active there until last year was Mr. Schick, Miroslav Schick, who emigrated from Prague, from Czech Republic in early 60s and then came back to teach. It was also my late husband, Martin Rubik, who emigrated in early 70s to Norway, where he started Snehetta, the renowned architecture studio, which is now, I would say, among top 10 studios in the world, the authors of Alexandrian Library and Opera in Oslo and other renowned building. And it was also Martin Kubelik, who is an architecture theoretician, who was very active both in American and Austrian academia. And I think that these two routes were also forming our school, which we have now and which me and my colleagues run for nearly 10 years. And it's really important what we want to bring into the Czech academia and influence the academia with, I would say, with the respect to students, with the openness, with frankness, and I think I've kind of formed the school as an ideal school for myself, and I am happy that we have the students. I have to admit, unfortunately, it's not like 50 to 50, international and local students, as Alexandra mentioned at the beginning. Unfortunately, we have less Czech or local students than we have like 20% of Czech students and the rest is international. I would definitely love to increase the number of local students, as for example, you have it in Moscow. I think I'm talking too long now, and I hope that as a short introduction into what we do, how we do it, was set. So thank you, Evgeny, and now it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Alexander, in the beginning, mentioned the major directions of our discussion, and one of that was it the opening of the school, the launching of our schools, was it critical somehow to existing schooling in our countries? And I think that that's a very important point. Why it appears. You explained that it was because you met in Norway, and it was more or less general for Western European schools of architecture, this kind of openness and the kind of respect to students. So in these terms, it was critical. Your school is, in a way, it is critical towards the existing schooling system, architectural schooling system in Czech Republic, maybe. So I don't know, did it change from the early 90s, or it's still the same? You said rigid, and so is it still the same or not? Okay, but my case is exactly, well, not exactly, but in a way it's kind of the same story, but without my experience of studying abroad. So I'm a completely Soviet product. So I was graduated from Moscow Institute of Architecture, Marhi, which is still the major in architectural education, the most important and the biggest school of architecture in the country. And I must say that it's important that in such a huge country as Russian Federation now, we have only about 60 schools of architecture, including the small, even not schools itself, but small departments of architecture in big universities, which are, well, I don't know, maybe 20 students. So it's strange that in such a huge country we have so few architectural schools. I don't know how many are in Czech Republics.
9. We are 9, including us.
Just 9. Okay, I don't know what is the proportion between the whole population and the number of students in schools. But anyhow, so the Moscow Architectural School, Marhi, Architecture Institute, Marhi is the biggest and the most influential, I would say, school in the country, and still is. It's very, very strange situation, my personal situation, that I was from the very beginning, from my early school years, I was very anti-Soviet, and I was very pro-Western for many reasons, partly personal, family reasons, partly because of my surrounding. But anyhow, I hated everything Soviet, and I was strongly oriented towards Western ideals of democracy, openness, and so on. And for me, the first chance to start some educational experiments, even inside Marhi, was the opening of experimental studio in late 80s after the so-called perestroika, when the whole situation in the country has been changed, and democracy and the beginning of new approaches toward everything. So everything somehow changed upside down, and it was a chance to start the new experiment in frame of this still very rigid and very bureaucratized system of Moscow Institute of Architecture. And we had chance to follow this studio from late 90s to 2010. So it's almost 20 years, yeah. And I think it was a great experience, which had no any which I would say that produced no effect on the School of Moscow Institute of Architecture. So absolutely closed and school inside the school, so it was a kind of our personal matter. And finally, following along with the changes in state politics, our experiment also was more or less out of interest of the school of the institute, and we actually were forced. I was forced to start to look for something new, and it was just the very good chance to find the good academic partner as the Cass Faculty of Architecture and Arts in London Metropolitan University, and found our business partner who supported our initiative in Moscow. And that's how the School March was launched. But it's exactly the same with exactly the same basic ideas to make school. First of all, to make another atmosphere, to make school open, to make school more oriented to students, to make school more oriented to humanitarian studies, to make school more human in general, and to make school pleasant and to make studying architecture fun, which was not in to make school more exciting. So, but next, probably that's time to ask you. To ask me, to ask you, and you can ask me. What is the basic principles in education itself, not just in atmosphere and relationships between students and teachers? What are you looking for in your education? What is your motto? What is your basic manifesto?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I mean, manifesto, that's something I'm constantly thinking about. It's slightly changing in time, but I think that as our field, our professional field, being an architect, urban planners, it's extremely multifaceted and open, and it's always going to be the mix of courses or subjects coming from social sciences, humanitarian, coming from technical field, architectural and art related field. I think we can never avoid the mix of these things. This will always remain. But what we want to do is to interconnect them and teach them not separately but together, ideally to interconnect the studio with our with other courses, and to make for students the real wild and rich picture of what planning and designing means. That these are not some kind of a separated dry data, but you always have to find kind of a joy and find an interest in each of them and combine them together. I think it's one aspect of the education we want to kind of give to our student. Another aspect is that we are far from being just building designers. I think that's the thing I was educated in, like, have a great facade which is balanced and either symmetrical or asymmetrical. uh, Having, we had to know 10 different ways how to found the building. We had to know how to found a skyscraper, and how to uh, I mean how to construct enormous amount of like different constructions or load-bearing systems. I think this is not necessary. I think we have to understand the world, and we have to understand not only the buildings, but the context of them. We have to know what's going on in the buildings through the human eyes, and we have to know how the building interact with its surrounding. I think that's probably also very much inspired by Scandinavian approach, where the landscape architecture has been taught in a so different way from the Central European our landscape architecture education. And I think this is one of the key elements we want to show to students. And I think that the architectural slash urbanism slash landscape architecture, I mean, this is becoming slowly one course, one subject. I think it's much broader than being just a building designer. So that's which I think we are also different from other schools. I'm afraid that some of the schools and programs are still very much into designing buildings by themselves and not having the broader picture. And probably the last moment I would like to mention about our education is a close relationship to practice. We collaborate with the studios, architecture studios, engineering studios, as well as with developers and others. And we want to prepare students for practice. We want to tell them how much things cost, what's necessary to deliver to the municipality in order to get a building or planning permit. We don't want to build an kind of an ivory towers, and want to show them what it really means to be an architect. It's lots of responsibility. It's actually a service which you give to your clients. And we also want to actually teach them about who their clients are, how to communicate with them, how to present them the ideas, and so on. So there are many aspects of the education we want to show, want to bring, want to pass over to our students. And also I would like to answer one of your questions. You stated at the beginning whether the academia has changed for past 30 years. I have to say yes, it did, and tremendously. Some of the architecture programs have changed in a kind of a bigger scale, some the minor one, But anyway, there are differences. There are big differences in that, and the schools are becoming more open. They are inviting international architects or theoreticians or historians to have their lectures there. And they also inspire their students to go abroad to experience the education outside of the Czech Republic. So I think this is a positive move. So that's from my side. And shall I give a question to you? Shall we play a table tennis?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know whether you know that I'm a table tennis player. So
really,
yes, I am. So
okay.
what I'm wondering, have you ever thought about teaching architecture? Now, probably it's a very practical thing, but in English, or because you are a branch of a renowned British university, and how would your education change if it would be in English? You know, what we experience, for example, is that to find the teachers from those different fields being able to speak English, being able to teach in English, it's rather difficult. And sometimes we also meet that, you know, the worries of our students or those applicants, that they don't have enough English or language skills, that they won't be able to study and so on. Probably this is very practical questions, but just something which just is in my mind.
Okay. Yeah. And it's easy to answer. Actually, our idea from the very beginning was to start Russian school, and it was a little bit problematic to get the how it is called, approval, not approval, from London, from accreditation from LMU for teaching in Russian. But for me, it was principle, and it was a key point that the school is oriented to Russian, because if your school is more oriented and you feel yourself in the center of Europe, which is correct, you are in the center of Europe, and you must be the international school. I hope maybe once we also will be international school, but up to now, I believe that we must change, or at least strongly influence the Russian educational system, and to change mentality of educators, or at least our graduates, who I foreseeing the nearest future, when they will become the practical architects, they will bring their ideas, and maybe they will make some strong steps toward changing the whole architectural system in the country. That's very ambitious plan, but for me it was important to think of our small school as the nest of the new generation of new practitioners and new architectural thinkers, maybe even first thinkers and then practitioners, because I believe that, you know, before practice you must think a little bit, at least. Nevertheless, we try to English, to learn English, to push them to read English books, and all lectures of our foreign guests, and we have every week at least one lecture from a guest from abroad, are without translation, are in English. So do they want or not, whether they want or not, they must somehow to follow the rules. But if we will make the choice, if we make the selection of students based on their good English, we will miss a lot of really good students. So in thinking of preferences, I would think of better of gifted students than of good speaking English students. So that's the point. Maybe once we will change our politics but it will be not that. So is it
Yeah, no,
clear?
definitely, it's more than clear, and I can just confirm, that our ideas and our concept was exactly the same as yours. We wanted first to influence the Czech situation in academia and to educate Czech students. On the other hand side, we thought that in Czech language, there are really few people in the planet who speak that language. So we thought we have to make an international school and to be able to educate both, like Czechs and I'm happy that some of our graduates, they stay in Prague or in the Czech Republic, and then they have a chance to influence the architecture scene as well from here. So but I'm glad to hear that our concepts were really the same. Yeah.
But at the same time, I must say that it's also important. Maybe I didn't say in the first my first speech that we very much were looking from the launching the school to incorporate our school in international context, because that's a very particular thing about the Russian history of architecture education, the Soviet, let's say. So you must imagine it's much longer period of the Soviet ruling than in Czech Republic. So we had for more than 50 years we were completely, totally separated from the international architecture world, and in a strange way, it's very interesting phenomena that being separated, and even everything happened in the West was strongly criticized as bourgeois perversion, or I don't know, something like this, in the very hard critique. And at the same time, students were following the Western prototypes. It was the kind of dissidence politics in architecture. On one hand, even in lectures on international architecture, everything was criticized, starting from Le Corbusier and Miss van der Rohe. There were absolutely enemies of everything good in architecture, as well as Russian avant-garde architects like Ginsburg and Melnikov and Leonidov. But at the same time, all the students were following their the same this manners. So that's very paradoxical and very strange history. And for me, it was extremely important to make our school incorporated in international educational family. That's even without being, even not being English speaking school. Okay, many of our students speak pretty good English, and teachers also, and we are selecting teachers who can speak English. So we are looking for being to be a part of international educational system, and being an important and very very specific part of this system. Not just one of the school, but the special school. Moscow School of Architecture is something very special.
Actually, now one question came to my mind again. I'm very often asked, how is our school different from other school in Prague or in Czech Republic? And I always found like two levels. One level is how it's different within the Czech context, and then how it's different in the international context. So my question would be, how different is your school in the international, let's say, in the international level? Because we sharing the same history, we can imagine how our schools are different on the local level. But it's always very difficult to describe, why we are here and what role we want to play within this international circles, let's say. Always difficult from my side to describe that. What I do say quite often is that we have one huge benefit, that we are situated in Prague. And I think if we would be in other Czech cities, I think we wouldn't have that. But Prague being really the history, the book of history of architecture, the assemble of different approaches, styles, and also giving us this chance to implement modern architecture into this historical context. I think that's what we definitely benefit from the city we are in, and from the surrounding in here. And but how is it in Moscow? How do you perceive? I think that as far as I've read about the school, you also, and heard from you before, you take also Moscow as your kind of focus point, and have projects there trying to implement the ideas of the students there and so on.
Well, not exactly, in fact. Even recently, my personal politics in my studio is not to deal with Moscow. Moscow is very complicated story, and when we have such a huge country, for me it's very interesting to discuss not only Moscow, which is it's separate country, in fact, in Russia, and most of Russians will say Moscow is Moscow, Russia is Russia. And for me it's extremely interesting how to implement our thoughts on different locations in the country, in Siberia, in Ural, in Far East, in northern cities, Arctic cities, and southern cities, because it's amazing how few architects are in this huge country, and how few architectural ideas are distributed on this huge territory. Speaking of the Prague is, I think in Czech Republic is much more compact context, and more, I would say, more homogeneous in a way. Even the city of Prague is much more homogeneous comparing with Moscow. Moscow is, as the whole, our country is a little bit crazy. And it's interesting, it's interesting. And if we're speaking about specifics, how I feel any specifics of our school in international context, I would say that yes, I do. And I'd like to emphasize it in our manifestos, that I strongly believe that what contemporary architecture strongly lacks is humanitarian basis. So it's contemporary architecture in general. If you look at the whole architectural field in the world, in the realm of architecture, where we see that it's mostly based on interests of business and power, and much less on the interests of society. And this is an interesting and important point for us to make our students to be more attentive to humanitarian aspects of architecture. Because if you look at the programs of architectural school, most of them are more or less the same, where technical studies and humanitarian studies and technical studies usually are a little bit even more than humanitarian, because it's because architecture still is understood as a kind of skill that you must know this and that, and that makes you architect. In my opinion, we must train, or I even use not word educate, but I don't know, upbring, or to nourish the integral man. I found it's interesting. I even prepared this quotation. I found this, you know, that in yeah. I start with the motto which we have in the school, that we are upbringing sensitive, intelligent, and responsible architects. And it's very, very important thing for me, that it's not just well-educated architects. And I found this quotation in a strange way in lessons of Stravinsky on poetics of music. And he says that I have interest in the phenomenon of music except insofar as it emanates from the integral man. I mean, from a man armed with the resources of his senses, his psychological faculties, and his intellectual equipment. So this, I think that it's good for composers, but even better for architects to be an integral man, because I believe that all technical skills are much easier to get in practical work than in the school. And 1 year of work in the practical studio will make your, if you're not lazy and stupid, you can easily get this skills from the studio. But to educate or to upbring integral man, this is something really important. And I'd like to, our school will be the school of training integral man architects. It's very ambitious, but I think that it's important, because I'm very, I don't like what happens in architecture in general in the world. That's why I think that our small school is something which maybe will distribute this rays of integrity around and make the world better.
Yep. I can ask Alexander, are there possibly any questions from the audience, that we are not like two of us playing table tennis?
Well, maybe Alexander has some questions.
We don't have any questions yet, but I guess we should encourage our audience to ask them. And you can use the chat to do so. But I was listening to your discussion, very interesting. I was thinking about one question that I wanted to ask you. Regina, you started your history of your school. You started with your experience in Norway, and by saying that these attitudes or these relationships between architecture and landscape were inspiring. And I'm very, you can kind of touch this already when you were talking about whether we want our students to design for Moscow or for Prague or for other cities. But still, I wanted to ask you, it seems that we orient, or we're trying to learn from other architectural experiences and educational experiences other than ours. And they're also coming from very different urban surroundings, especially different, not only in historical sense, but in the sense of what is going on right now in Moscow and Prague. With all these new developments, a new economical mechanism that we are trying to master for Moscow, it's last 30 years. So how much these external experiences, how much they are applicable to where we are now, Moscow Architecture School and Architecture School in Prague. And when Eugene, when you were talking that we want to also change not only our situation, but maybe globally, it also was interesting. What do we can bring? What kind of experience could be valuable for the global community? From what do we have in Moscow and Prague that could be interesting for anyone else outside?
So I shall take the question about the differences between like northern, let's say the northern countries and let's say Central European country and their landscape, and thinking about how to place a building within its surrounding. I think it's really different in tradition, in the context aspects as well, as for example, this has never been like thought through in our history, how to place apart from the vernacular architecture, but the architects in here, they never thought how to place a single building into the landscape. It was always a kind of a flat plateau and the building on the top of it. Of course, the Scandinavians have they have a different number of inhabitants. They have a totally different landscape. In some parts, probably more similar to your northern and Arctic areas, which is of course more challenging than being here squeezed by the big kind of big states in the middle of Europe. But I think this is inspirational, and it's slowly being improved in the Czech Republic as well, that you think about the slopes very rarely you have just a flat landscape or the flat area you are placing your building into. So I think that's something which we draw inspiration from that approach, in contrary to very garden-like landscape education here. We had this tradition of being a landscape architect meant being a kind of a better gardener here. So I think this is an important to mention. And then when I mentioned Prague and being trained in Prague and learn from Prague, and it's mostly like taking the city as a laboratory. I'm not saying the students are going to train here and not having in mind the broader context, but the students are using this city very much and its different aspects. I would say, of course, the center, as Evgeny mentioned, the center is very compact, but if you go further from the center, as in other cities, it's very heterogeneous. So you can learn a lot, and we really do use that city as a laboratory. So that's from my side. And I give a ball to Evgeny.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, well, I don't know what. Actually, what is the main task? I think that what is I would do a little bit aside. I will go a little bit aside. What do we teach? What do we? What is the matter we are teaching? What we know about architecture? What is architecture, and what do we understand under the term of architecture? This is the key problem of contemporary architectural school. When we are talking about this multidisciplinary or the including different methods in understanding and so on, it's okay. But what I'm afraid that we are losing the autonomy of architecture, which is extremely important for understanding the very profession of architecture. So for me, of course, we are looking on the environment as a complexity, as the complex whole, but I also think about historical architecture, which our call this big datas, and these buildings and the cities. I don't know the most sustainable building, Palazzo Pitti. It brings some interesting ideas with our who are we training and what. I maybe changed a bit maybe of our talk and to the title of our discussion. What happened? Notice the changes in educational.
Something, of course, there were no students here everywhere, but what we inspired them to cope with the different electronic devices, to cope with e-learning and distance learning. And it took us years and years, and suddenly, all of them managed to jump into it and started to teach immediately. I would say it was much easier in let's say technical courses, other courses, and it was nearly impossible in the studios. It was and then when you think about architecture education being online, I think that's something. Of course, it has its positives and negatives, but in the studio teaching, we found it very difficult to teach, and I think that the studio is the core of our education, where not only what you do, what you draw is important, but what you experience, what you discuss with your colleagues, teachers, pass-byers, all that is important. And I'm afraid that this aspect of studio education was lost somehow in translation, or was lost inside. Of course, it has a positive aspects, as what we discussed before. You can invite anybody as a critique. You can invite anybody from Tokyo or Pittsburgh to hold a lecture. but you cannot invite the people to be near you, to feel how they react physically on your questions or on your project. And this, I think, it's really kind of an important aspect of architecture education. So on one hand side, great experience in, for example, history of architecture or different theoretical courses to teach that, or technical courses, but unfortunately studio teaching became very difficult, and I don't think it benefited from this distant learning. I don't know, how was your experience?
No, it's very interesting, and of course, for the first moment, it was really upset with this. It was, as a matter of fact, I'm not very much computer man, so that's I used to draw by hand, and I used to live in not in virtual world but in real world. So I like the this experience, the real material experience. But what I must say that happened lately, I found first that I hardly can discuss the other disciplines which are in our school, we are taught by online, but concerning studio, first we have 100% attendance, absolutely, for the first time in the 8 years of our school. I had all studio days, I had 100% attendance of students. It was okay, and all of them were eager to show what they did. So I suppose that this isolation somehow made them more to force them to concentrate more on their design work. It was important for them to make something to show next day, and they thought more intensively than usually. That was the first. The second, of course, they lack seriously the direct communication. And it's interesting what our annual poll, which we just get from our students, showed that on the question, how did you pass through this hard months of quarantine, and the question were, what did you suffer more of what? And first it was we suffered most, 20% said that we suffered of contacts with colleagues, with students, and not only from the studio but from the school in general, that they had not feeling of being in. The second, they suffered of the lack of contacts with tutors. It was 25%, so 25%. Then 25% said that they suffered of lack of modeling and making work with in workshops and make some, making something which they used to do. And it's also and this is very important thing, that but not 100% said that they were not satisfied with it, but just 25. And just 5 or 10% said that they missed a lot library and something else like this, computer classes and something like this. And it's very interesting, this distribution of interests of students, that I found that most of them really lack the atmosphere of the school. The school as the body, the school as the team, the school as the whole. That's, I think, very important, and it's something which make me happy. But at the same time, we get some benefits. You already mentioned that we had chance to made our open presentations, and we gathered a lot of viewers and visitors to our presentations, and we also had the chance to invite critiques from all over the world for our presentations, which is amazing benefit for the small school. So that's a very controversial experience. I suppose that finally we can use, I would say 50% of studio work must be offline and 50% could be online. There are some really interesting experience in discussion of projects in Zoom, especially when they use SketchUp and they can change immediately what they are doing. Usually I hate this and I ask them to draw, but this was interesting because they understood how the project lives immediately, and so I think I found a lot of interesting new methods in this experience this month.
I'd like to ask some questions that we're getting in our chat, but before that, I'd like to ask a question from myself. You started talking about how the process of education has changed because of the quarantine, and I wondered, there is a certain unwritten contract which is established between schools and students, and the poll that Eugene just mentioned kind of describes the expectations of students of what schools are delivering to them, atmosphere, connection, real time, and so on. So what do you think? What schools are? What are schools' obligations beyond technical stuff, program? What are school obligations? And if they're changing, how do we meet students' expectations in the future?
This is a difficult question. What are schools' obligations? When you when you mentioned the atmosphere and feelings being together, this is one of our major aspects of education as well. We are family, we call, and our students also call the atmosphere here very kind of familiar. We are very small. We have around like maximum 20-25 students in 1 year. So altogether we were 80 actually this academic year. And we are going to remain that, and I hope we are going to rise a bit, but not more than that. So making this very familiar and home-like atmosphere, I think that's important. And also what's in my mind is that somewhere I heard that actually it's not so much important what you learn at school, but important is be at school. And now I don't mean physically be, but be part of that, be part of academia and get that experience. many of my classmates, they actually never appeared in school. They they just were somewhere in the workshop or library. They never came for a lecture or seminar, and at the end they came with excellent project. So I think that's very very sensitive question on one side, that this many good architects in the history were not educated as architects, or they didn't have any education at all on the other hand side. So this is, I think, very thin ice to walk on. What is the obligatory kind of approach, or what school should deliver or must deliver? I think it differs so much from person to person. What are the expectations of students
from school?
And what do they expect? What do they, very, very often I meet when we, accept our first year students, they have totally different image in their head, what it means to be an architect or to study architecture. So then, you really start from scratch, from the beginning, with the architecture, let's say architecture alphabet and so on. So everyone is different. And I think so probably the obligatory part of what school should deliver is to fulfill that, to actually give each student what he or she requires, or what he or she feels for, I would say.
Should I? And I also must answer, yeah? Are you waiting my
If you
answer?
want,
Yeah?
you want to.
No, no, I agree. I think that it's more or less, I would say more or less the same that Regina said. I think that I think it's very important that we're small schools. That's extremely important. I don't know what are your, how do you foresee your future to increase your school? We are not. I'd like to stay in this as a small school. And for me, it's extremely important because really this feeling of family, the feeling of team, the feeling and the very opportunity, very possibility to know each student in the school is very important. That I know them personally, and it's very different than in the big university when you have, I don't know, 600 or 2,000 students, or even more. But I think the obligation, if we speak about obligation, it's very, very difficult and very delicate question. I would like to make life of my students interesting. I think that what we can do to make their study interesting, to make their everyday to make every day bringing something interesting to them, that to open the world, to make new ideas, to and they can feel that it's important to come to the school and to get something, and and this something is not obligatory, but it's interesting. It's not because we push them to learn something, but to get them some tasty food, which is really interesting and after all, how it's called, good for health, healthy. Yes.
Just a very short follow-up from me, and next I'll read some questions from the chat. I think that what this new situation also brings, and it kind of connected with what was before, when students were choosing schools, when students were coming out of schools with degrees, they also, I guess, they were also interested in how these could affect their careers, right? So good school names, so good projects, good grades could make them more interesting for the labor market, or for could affect in some way their careers. So the question that I started thinking about is, with all these means of media that we can use now, and it started even before this whole Zoomization of education, schools can also provide a certain level, and in a very fast way, certain level of exposure. You can now look, even before that, you could go to a website of a school and you can look through students' projects, or some students published the work more in a different way, being more open. Now you can do it in even more on a greater scale. So do you think the students are expecting, or will expect in the future, more of these from schools, that schools will expose them to well, future employers, or well, architectural community, public in general? What do you think? Our schools are in charge of this?
I have a feeling that the good employer, the good studio, should definitely benefit out of it. You know, if you, very often I hear complaints from my colleague architects how insufficiently the students were educated, and how difficult it is to get, you know, the fresh architects, that they have to, you know, educate them. But I think that if these employers, if they would learn how to access the data which schools are producing, promoting, sharing, they can only benefit out of it. You know, to see how the students are educated, what they can, what they are able to do, to also to know them more, and to learn what they can, you know, take out of them, or to what they they can, how they can kind of not use them, this is the bad word, but how they can implement them into the projects they do. I think that it's only a benefit, it's only beneficial.
Mm-hmm. But there is also controversy, right? As I see it, because before that, schools were sort of safe place for students to make mistakes, to be stupid, and it was also a safe place for academics to also to criticize the discipline, the profession, the industry. So now it's it's all over. We're all exposed. The boundary between academic life and real life is not exist anymore.
No, I think that our mistakes are going to be public. That we are not going to hide them in the academic field, and hide them from the outside world. I think with the democratization and openness and sharing the data, you know, our mistakes are going to be shared as well. So this is my kind of immediate reaction to what you are saying. And of course, I always inspire students to make mistake, you know, not to be afraid, to experiment, and not just to follow the teachers, not just to follow the masters, so-called, which I hope will not exist anymore, but to be really free. So why not the others look back into their education, what they got, and to look also how we educate the future architects. Mm-hmm. That would be my answer.
What do you think, Eugene?
Well, first, I think that 90% of architecture is mistake. That's I think we must be very critical to our work, and not our, but in general, and to check is it mistake or not is almost impossible. especially when we see already built environments and we understand that it was wrong, and it is wrong for many reasons. So students' mistakes are not that dangerous as professionalists' mistakes. Concerning that there's students entering the profession, I suppose that it's really, as Regina said, that I hate this discussion of practical practitioners that you are producing architects not ready for real work, which is and it is you know, this is a speech of businessmen, but not of men of culture, because men of culture is ready to support and to make cultural movements and to help new talent and new person to live and to grow. If you remember, you know, the history of Regina already mentioned that many architects were not even trained as architects. Let's say Le Corbusier, Auguste Perret didn't say him, you cannot draw, go away, you know, I don't need you. But he, for 3 years, he helped him to become an architect, and he showed him the roots of his journey around the world, and that was the school. If you're asking what the school of the future, maybe the best school of the future is the trip with tutors, as Le Corbusier did, with some short stops in different studios to work for half a year in Portugal, half a year in Italy, half a year in Czech Republic, half a year in Norway, and look very attentively to architecture and to feel architecture and to understand architecture not by drawings but the real experience. That's what we lack in most of our architectural schools. The problem of architectural education is that students never see or never experience their product in reality. You know, composers can hear their music, painters are looking at their paintings, actors are acting in dramas, but architects see only the documents. They never see never experience their materially realized product. So this is very important. I think that what I said, that maybe it's not exactly an answer to your question, but speaking of architect of the future architectural school, I think that it would be best school. It's a kind of moving school, a big bus traveling around the world, 5 years with students and some tutors showing good architecture and life around the world.
May I have one comment? One comment to it. We have been traveling a lot during my studies, mostly on our own. But, you know, I was always picking up the best examples of modern architecture or historical architecture. And now I have a feeling I should have actually more be interested in like ordinary or bad architecture. I think we also, from the side of our tutors, was always the, you know, the excellent architecture shown to us. And suddenly when you are in practice and when you draw or design the buildings, suddenly, you know, you see that those excellent examples probably were not the thing you were supposed. Of course, you should visit it, but probably more attention should have been paid to mistakes in urban planning, mistakes in architecture, and in the architecture word, which I would say prevails, because our word is not composed only by the masterpieces. So
But
it's
you
just
know,
my
Regina,
comment.
no, it's interesting that my recent studio, which just criticized the week before, was the brief was rethinking beauty, and I asked students to rethink the very concept of beauty, what they suppose beauty is today, and unexpectedly, without my special efforts toward the direction, at least half or maybe more of them made how to say it, not ugly, but ordinary architecture. They choose, they found beauty in ordinary and simple things. That was surprising that they choose this direction, and I'm very happy with this, because it was not inventing of new beauty, but it was reflection of what is nice because it is nice. So that's,
or even
that,
which is not nice, I would say.
but it's, you know, this is the point.
Yeah.
What we call nice, that's
Yeah,
it's not Venustas. Yeah, that's the point, you know, because Venustas, it's about it's about Venus. It's about not beauty, but more about what the right word for this?
Pleasing for the eyes.
Pleasing, yeah, pleasing, and even more, yeah, some. Okay, forgot the word, but you know what I meant.
Let me ask some questions that we're getting from our audience, and thank you, our attendees. Thank you for these questions. One question deals with the again with some kind of boundaries between different realms. And the question is, how could we describe our schools? I'm rephrasing the question to make it maybe more generalized. Could we describe our schools as global, local, or these kind of distinctions does not mean anything today? And I think what Eugene, you were talking just now about the beauty of ordinary. Do you think that ordinary architecture is now more or less the same, you know, all over the world, or it's different? Ordinary architecture, ordinary experiences. Is it any sense in being local today?
Well, I think yes, it is, and local is very global. Like you know, even just because it is local, it's you know, it's like language. It's like I don't know, some habits or traditions, rituals. You know, the project which my student, oh no, you don't know this project, which just this year my student from Kalmykia made. You know, Kalmykia is a very small republic in the southern Russia, the very unexpectedly small Buddhist country in the center, surrounded by Orthodoxes. So this is Kalmyks, they're Tibetan Buddhists. So he built the small monastery in the steppe in Kalmykia. It's very local. problem in very special place, for very special reason. This monastery is built exactly in this place, and the locality, the Buddhistic identity is extremely important for this small population of this country, because it's maybe because exactly they are surrounded by another culture, and this locality is very important, and the identity of this place is extremely important. But at the same time, the language which he used is a combination of local Buddhist traditions with global formal languages, which are you can find maybe in different contexts, but in this context it's very special. So it's a kind of global approach, but located in the right place and in forms which are special for this locality. So this, I think, this is, I see no big problem in this dichotomy. It works because it works. I suppose that it's we know a lot of projects in recent years which are very local, but at the same time very global because of international discussion, because of international publications, and I see no contradictions between those 2 points.
I think when speaking about design and formal languages, you are completely right. But also when speaking about the role of architecture school being local, what we want to do here and what we want to achieve to give back to the community, you know, to collaborate with the institutions which need some architecture or design input, and also to support the life around school, let's say. And I think that's a very important aspect which hasn't been actually applied in our part of the world. This responsibility, we spoke about the responsibility, but about kind of a direct interaction between school, students, and the local community. I think this is very important, and I felt this, or I learned that in Pittsburgh. I was half a year there at the Carnegie Mellon University at the School of Design there, and in America, they I think that they perceive it in totally different way. You know, this active role of schools within the local community. So that would be also probably my answer to the question being local or global. That one aspect is the formal language and how you apply that to your design. But the other thing is to be active as a human being, which who can, you know, help others through the profession.
This is a very good transition to another question which we were asked. How do you think our schools, or well, in general architectural education, should be engaged with the global topics like climate change, for example?
If I may,
in the context of our discussion, what do you think?
If I may, I wouldn't start with the climate change. I would start with health. That's the topic which became quite kind of important and crucial, especially in past few months. And it became our topic like few months ago, when we started to collaborate with the biggest hospital in Prague. Suddenly, you know, we kind of worked on the projects for them, trying to, you know, bring our knowledge for like small projects like the waiting room to the bigger scale, like public spaces among the buildings and so on. and it you know, suddenly, you know, the necessity of designers, architects participating in, you know, hospital design, not designing new buildings, but changing very small things which the visitors and patients would benefit from, looks like a very important thing. So this is a very small projects we are working on at the moment, but through these small projects, I think this is one aspect of it. Sometimes I'm a bit skeptical towards bigger questions. We rather work on small practical things, and we also hope, as you do, that through this small thing you can influence the bigger picture, let's say.
Yep, I must just add that I'm also a bit skeptical about the role of architects in solving the global problems of global warming and so on, especially because it's a lot of speculation on this matter, including the warming, the energy saving, and all these things, which are really, really important. But I'm afraid that nobody knows exactly how architect can solve this problem. But we like to talk on this matter, but it's very complicated thing. But we try. We are thinking on this, but I have no particular ideas how we can effect this solution of this big problems.
Speaking about large topics and huge questions, we partly touched it before in our discussion, but one of our listeners, attendees, is interested in, I would say, in the balance between vocational and humanitarian training in architecture education. How much technological level, hard and soft skills level are important in comparison with the speculative discussions, bringing up an integral person, and so on. And in light of our general topic, do you think that vocational training could be completely expelled from schools, that students could study SketchUp and technical norms and lots of other things through YouTube tutorials, or I don't know, working on a building sites, and schools would be reserved to discussions and politics of architecture, that sort of things? Do you think do you think these two things could be separated one from another?
I will give word to Evgeny. I'll have to think about it a bit.
I'm ready to answer. No, in fact, I suppose that in architecture, that's a very important thing of architecture and of the very ability to design, is to think of this technical methods in frame of architecture. As think of this as architectural problem. I used to tell to my students the story how once I found myself in the small railroad station somewhere in Ohio, state of Ohio, in very cold December morning. It was 10 minutes stop in absolutely nowhere, and it was the small pavilion, empty inside, with the row of heating radiators in the middle, surrounded by benches. and that was it. So it was architecture. So this is a great architecture because it was heating warm. It was warm seats in the middle of the pavilion, and that was it. I think that it was the right architectural solution. It was about it was not just the spatial design, but it was design about how to feel comfortable in this space. So this is technical solution in frame of architecture. Structural engineering is a part of architecture for sure. We cannot design without having in mind some work of the structural elements. We cannot design without thinking about many things. And one of my studios 3 or 4 years ago was called was named Rethinking Norms. So, and poetry of norms was the very important part of the architectural thinking. How we think about norms in poetic terms, not in terms of just following rules and regulations, but about norms as the cultural norms. So I think that all these things are part of architecture and part of humanitarian approach to architecture. But it's complicated how to teach it in frame of architectural design. This is usual problem in all architectural schools, because structural engineering and all other technical studies are separated from design. But when you incorporate it inside the design, it becomes the part of your poetic thinking of architecture. That's, I think, very important. The way you asked about, is it the matter of vocational presentation or not, or it should be learned by, yes, of course, it can be learned by books or now by information sources in internet, but best way of learning it is in frame of studio, in design process. That's my opinion in this matter.
Yeah, and I couldn't, agree more. I would also say, especially at our school, where you meet people from different parts of the world. So to teach like law in architecture, or technical norms and so on, we rather teach the principles and give an examples than teach through the examples, or through the concrete norms. And I think that, and we haven't actually touched the methods of teaching. This we probably should keep for other discussions, because I think we are also now at the moment in the age of, breaking the old way of teaching, like standing in front of the students and, telling them the truth, into sharing the knowledge, teachers learning from students, and inventing constantly new methods how to open up and inspire students in different fields. So I think that's also important, because many of schools, not only on university level, but secondary or primary schools, unfortunately still keep this so-called, front education, like teacher as a master and the students. I think that also has changed tremendously.
Well, our meeting is almost 2 hours now long. I think we could move to some, if there are some closing statements, and maybe the question that I would ask to provoke them is, generally, with your experience, well, long years of experience and your latest experience, this this spring, do you think that we are on the verge of some crucial changes in architectural education, or well, the pandemic will be over, we'll be out of our lockdowns and everything will get back to how it was before?
I'm afraid that the crisis we are experiencing, or we are going to experience, I think that now we are in good times. I think it's the crisis is deeper than we can imagine now. So I'm afraid that we cannot see that far. I think it would be like Sibylla and the glass globe to Gestrom. So I think that if some changes arrive, we cannot imagine in which direction they would go. And yeah, that probably would be my answer.
Well, I agree. I feel that we are on the edge, but I don't know of the edge of what. That's something happened the last 3 months or 4 months, and we cannot now predict what will happen next. Of course, we learned a lot. We experienced very exciting moment of global life, incredible. And if you imagine that, if we add now to the crisis with pandemic, and now we add to this what happens now all over the world with Black Lives Matter, and all these things which are and this is not meant. So we are not we cannot foresee the next the next steps in education. I'm sure that we can think of it, and probably we will change something in our approach in education, or at least in our approach to architectural aims of architecture now these days. We must rethink architecture. We must rethink urban planning. We must rethink a lot of things. But the motto of our school is rethinking, so we're doing this.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think it's time to finish the discussion, but this is only the first one, and maybe next weeks we'll even support some of our predictions, or give us more data to build new predictions. Our next meeting will be held as soon as on this Saturday, featuring architects and teachers Tom Emerson from ATH Zurich and Sam Jacob from Illinois Institute of Architecture. And follow our announcements in social networks and on the program website. Many thanks to our guests and everyone who was watching and listening and was asking questions, and as well to our interpreter, Alexander Bajic, for his contribution to this conversation. Thank you very much. And see you all on Saturday. And, we practically have one discussion almost 2 or 3 days. So it will be an intense global faculty meeting for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Silent uploading for everyone.
Thank you, Regina. And I'm very, we could continue. I'm sorry that I cannot invite you to the restaurant to continue our meeting, but hopefully next time we'll do it, either in Prague or somewhere else.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Alexander, for organization and all, things which are related to organize and held such a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for
Goodbye.
supporting the effort. Goodbye to everyone. And